Chosen One Heaven has just initiated a divine interruption in your life. What you are sensing right now is not coincidence, emotion, or imagination. Something has shifted. In the unseen realm, the vault of stolen years has been opened, and your name is engraved on what is being released. This is not a slow recovery or a gradual turnaround. This is sudden restoration. What you once believed was lost, wasted, or irretrievable has moved from buried to recovered, from forgotten to fully redeemed. Time itself is being redefined in your favor, and everything you thought was delayed is now being accelerated. Right now, at this very moment, God is repositioning what the enemy assumed was gone forever. The years taken by betrayal, the seasons consumed by pain, the moments swallowed by regret were never destroyed. They were preserved, stored, protected beyond the reach of what tried to break you. God is not merely returning those years, He is multiplying them. What you are about to understand will transform how you see every closed door, every long wait, every disappointment that once felt final. What looked like loss was actually preparation, and what felt like delay was divine alignment. This message is not casual encouragement. It is a summons. Stay fully present because what is unfolding now requires your agreement. When you respond in faith, heaven responds in power. That stirring you feel in your spirit is recognition. Truth is colliding with your destiny. And as you align with it, restoration activates. You were never meant to walk this path alone, and this moment marks a turning point where isolation ends and divine acceleration begins. Here is what most people never realize: time was never your enemy. The enemy simply distorted your perception of time to convince you that you waited too long, lost too much, or fell too far behind. But God does not live within time, He rules over it. What appears irreversible to you is fully redeemable to Him. You mourned what time took, but God has been storing what time could never destroy. Every tear-filled prayer, every unseen sacrifice, every seed planted in darkness was deposited into a spiritual account that never stopped growing. Scripture confirms this truth with authority. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. That is not comfort, it is transaction. Repayment means restoration with interest. God is not rewinding your past. He is compressing your future. He is collapsing years into moments and accelerating what should have taken decades into what will manifest suddenly. And the only thing required now is this: stop mourning what is behind you and prepare for what is coming forward. Heaven has already begun. What you are about to understand now is how this restoration begins to take form in your real everyday life, because God does not restore in abstractions. He restores in details. He restores in moments you thought had already passed you by. He restores in opportunities you stopped praying about because disappointment convinced you they were gone forever. And this is where many people struggle, because the first layer of restoration is often the most emotionally charged, the restoration of opportunities you believe you missed. For a long time, you have carried quiet grief over doors that closed before you could walk through them. Opportunities that seemed perfectly aligned but slipped away at the last moment. Relationships that ended before they could fully unfold. Assignments that felt like your calling, yet somehow never materialized. You replayed the what-ifs in your mind. What if you had moved sooner? What if you had spoken up? What if you had known then what you know now? Over time, those questions didn't just bring sadness, they formed regret. And a regret, if left unchecked, becomes an agreement with the lie that you are behind, late, or disqualified. But heaven has never labeled your story that way. God has never called you too late. He has never looked at your timeline and said, they missed it. What you interpreted as loss was never loss. In His eyes, it was repositioning. Scripture quietly but powerfully reveals this when it says there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Notice the language carefully. It does not say there is only one time. It does not say one chance, one door, one opportunity that defines your entire destiny. It says a time, a season, which means God is not limited to the moment you were limited by. That door that closed years ago did not close because you failed, It closed because timing matters as much as calling. The assignment attached to that opportunity was real, but the version of you at that time was still being prepared. God is faithful enough to withhold what would have crushed you if it arrived too early. Many people think God denies them when doors close, but in reality, He is protecting them. If you had walked through some of those doors when you wanted to, you would have stepped into pressure your character could not yet sustain. You would have received influence before humility had been fully formed. You would have been elevated before your foundation was strong enough to hold the weight. So God held it back, not to punish you, not to tease you, but to mature you, to strengthen you, to align you. And now, because of what you've survived, what you've learned, and how you've grown, you are finally equipped to steward what once felt just out of reach. This is why restoration does not look like going backward. It looks like God bringing forward what was always meant for you, now upgraded by wisdom, discernment, and resilience. You must understand this clearly. Nothing you were meant to have was ever truly lost. It was preserved until you could carry it without it destroying you. That opportunity you thought passed forever is coming back in a different form, with better timing and greater capacity attached. That relationship you mourned is being replaced not necessarily with the same person, but with a healthier connection that reflects who you are now, not who you were then. That assignment you believed slipped through your fingers is returning with more authority, more clarity, and more impact than before. But here is where restoration becomes conditional, not on God's ability, but on your posture. You cannot receive what is ahead of you while living emotionally anchored to what is behind you. Every moment you spend replaying the past is a moment your attention is pulled away from what God is unfolding in front of you. Regret is not harmless nostalgia. It is a spiritual distraction. It keeps you staring at closed doors while open ones are quietly waiting for you to notice them. This is why bitterness must be addressed honestly. Some of what you regret is tied to people who betrayed you, delayed you, misled you, or walked away when you needed them most. You may not even realize how much energy you've been spending wishing things had turned out differently, but God cannot restore opportunity while resentment is still dictating your focus. Restoration requires release, not because those people deserve it, but because you do. There are doors God has already marked as complete that you keep revisiting in your mind. Conversations you keep replaying. Outcomes you keep wishing you could rewrite. And while you are doing that, God is saying, lift your eyes. Because what He is releasing now requires your full attention forward. The next opportunity will not look exactly like the last one. It will require discernment, courage, and readiness. And if you are still chained to the past, you will miss it, not because God didn't bring it, but because you weren't positioned to receive it. This is the moment where you choose to stop mourning and start preparing. Preparation is the language of faith. It says, I trust that what God has for me is not behind me, it is ahead of me. When you release regret, you create space. When you let go of bitterness, you regain clarity. When you stop rehearsing disappointment, you sharpen your ability to recognize divine timing. And here is the deeper truth many never grasp. God does not just restore opportunities, He restores them with increase. What is coming will not simply match what you lost, it will surpass it. The door ahead carries more authority than the door behind. The assignment ahead carries greater impact. The influence ahead is broader, deeper, and more aligned with who you have become. Because God always builds upon growth. He never ignores it. But this restoration demands an internal decision. You must consciously cancel the agreement you made with regret. You must renounce the lie that says you are behind schedule. Heaven does not operate on human timelines. God is not measuring your progress against other people. He is aligning you with purpose, not comparison. When you say yes to that truth, something breaks. The heaviness lifts, the pressure eases, and suddenly you can breathe again. This is why your voice matters in this moment. Speaking your release out loud is not symbolic, it is authoritative. Words create alignment. When you declare that you release every opportunity you thought you lost, you are breaking the spiritual hold of the past. When you cancel agreement with regret, you dismantle the lie that time defeated you. And when you declare that God is restoring lost time with upgraded opportunity, you are aligning yourself with what heaven has already decided. Do not underestimate how powerful this shift is. Many people stay stuck, not because God refuses to restore, but because they refuse to let go. They keep their eyes on what ended instead of what is emerging. But you are being called higher. Forward, into readiness. So ask yourself honestly, now what opportunity are you still mourning? What door are you still staring at that God already told you to walk away from? What season are you trying to revive that He has already marked as complete? These questions are not meant to shame you, they are meant to free you. Because once you identify what you've been clinging to, you can finally release it. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The weight lifts. The fog clears. And you become aware of movement again. New conversations, new ideas, new invitations, new alignments. Opportunities you could not have accessed before suddenly begin to find you. Not because you chased them, but because you are finally ready. This is the first dimension of restoration, and it is already unfolding. The moment you release the past, the future accelerates. What you thought you missed is not gone. It is coming back, refined, strengthened, and multiplied. God is not late. You are not behind. And the story is far from over. As profound as the restoration of opportunities is, it only scratches the surface of what time tried to take from you. Beneath missed doors and delayed assignments lies something far more personal, far more foundational. Because while time may have touched your circumstances, its deeper assault was aimed at your sense of self. And this is where the restoration God is initiating becomes intensely intimate. He is restoring your identity, the version of you that existed before. Disappointment taught you to shrink before betrayal, taught you to guard your heart before life convinced you that being cautious was safer than being courageous. Over the years, time did not simply pass. It pressed. It pressed on your confidence, your clarity, your willingness to believe boldly. Little by little, experiences began to shape how you saw yourself. Failures whispered that you were less capable than you once believed. Trauma suggested that openness was dangerous. Rejection told you that maybe you had overestimated your value. And without realizing it, you began adjusting, playing smaller, dreaming, quieter, hoping cautiously. Not because God changed His mind about you, but because life convinced you that the version of yourself you once carried was no longer sustainable. This was never accidental. The enemy's strategy was never just to delay your progress, it was to redefine your identity while time passed. To let years go by so quietly that one day you would wake up believing you were no longer who God originally called you to be. To convince you that the boldness you carried in your early years was naive, that the dreams you once had were unrealistic, that the fire you once felt had simply burned out. But none of that is true. Fire does not disappear, it gets buried under ash. And God specializes in rekindling what still carries His breath. Scripture dismantles the lie of identity erosion with breathtaking clarity. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Read that slowly. Before time ever touched you. Before mistakes, before trauma. Before seasons that reshaped your behavior. God's knowledge of you predates every experience that tried to rename you. Your calling was established before your failures ever occurred. Your assignment existed before your disappointments ever formed. That means time does not have the authority to redefine what God authored. You are not who life forced you to become. You are who God declared you to be before life ever tested you. And this is the identity God is restoring now, not a patched up version of who you are today, but a reawakened version of who you were always meant to be. The courage you used to have, the clarity you once walked in, the joy that used to come naturally, the authority you carried before self-doubt learned your name. None of that was lost. It was buried for survival, not erased. Think of a seed placed deep in the ground. To the natural eye, it looks forgotten, hidden, still. But underground, unseen, that seed is doing critical work. Roots are forming, strength is developing, capacity is increasing. The darkness is not punishment, it is preparation. And when the moment comes, that seed does not emerge weaker because of the time spent buried. It emerges stronger, more stable, more capable of sustained growth. That is what those years did for you. They did not destroy your identity, they fortified it beneath the surface. But here is where the battle intensifies, because the enemy knows something powerful if you ever fully reclaim who you are. You become unstoppable. So he introduces a new lie, one that sounds practical, even reasonable. He says too much time has passed. You're too old now. You're too scarred, too cautious, too removed from who you used to be. He tells you that the old version of you belonged to another season, and that trying to reclaim it now would be irresponsible or unrealistic. And if you believe that lie, you will settle for a diminished version of yourself, while God is offering full restoration. God is not asking you to become someone new. He is calling you back to alignment with his original design. He is not asking you to ignore your experiences. He is asking you to redeem them. The restored identity is not naive, it is wise. It is not reckless, it is discerning. It is not unguarded, it is grounded. You are not going backward to who you were. You are moving forward as who you were always meant to become, now strengthened by everything you've endured. This restoration of identity often feels unsettling at first because it challenges the survival strategies you built over time. You learned to protect yourself by staying quiet. God is restoring your voice. You learned to stay guarded to avoid pain. God is restoring your ability to trust. You learned to manage expectations so disappointment wouldn't hurt as much. God is restoring your capacity to hope boldly again. And your nervous system may resist this shift because healing can feel unfamiliar when you've lived in defense mode for too long. But understand this, what feels uncomfortable now is alignment returning. The version of you that God is restoring may feel foreign only because you have been disconnected from it for a long time. Yet your spirit recognizes it instantly. That stirring you feel, that mix of longing and fear, is not confusion, it is remembrance. Something deep within you knows this is who you were always meant to be. Time tried to convince you that growth meant becoming harder, quieter, smaller. God says growth means becoming whole. He is restoring your boldness, not arrogance, but holy confidence. He is restoring your clarity, not impulsiveness, but spiritual discernment. He is restoring your joy, not emotional highs, but deep-rooted gladness that is not dependent on circumstances. This is not about reliving the past. It is about reclaiming alignment. And here is a truth you must anchor yourself in: identity restoration always precedes visible breakthrough. Before God elevates your influence, he re-establishes your sense of self. Before he expands your territory, he heals how you see yourself within it. If you do not believe you are who God says you are, you will sabotage what he brings into your hands. That is why this phase matters so deeply. God is not just preparing what you will receive, he is preparing who you will be when it arrives. This is why you must consciously renounce the false versions of yourself that formed in response to pain. The less than version, the don't expect too much version, the stay hidden so you won't get hurt version. Those identities were coping mechanisms, not calling. They helped you survive, but they cannot help you step into restoration. And God is gentle but firm about this. What protected you then will limit you now. So ask yourself honestly, what part of yourself did you bury to survive? Was it your creativity, your emotional openness, your leadership instincts, your spiritual boldness? At what point did you decide it was safer to suppress that part of you than to let it shine? Those questions are not meant to reopen wounds. They are meant to guide healing. Because whatever you buried is exactly what God is breathing life back into now. Restoration of identity is not something you manufacture through effort. It is something you receive through surrender. You do not have to strive to be bold again. You allow God to remove the fear that muted you. You do not force clarity. You let him dismantle the confusion that accumulated over time. You do not create joy. You release the heaviness that replaced it. Identity restoration is less about adding and more about uncovering. And this is why your declaration matters. When you say out loud that you are not defined by what time took, but by what God called you before you were born, something shifts internally. You are reminding your soul who it belongs to. You are re-establishing spiritual order. You are aligning your self-perception with heaven's perspective. Words matter because they shape agreement, and agreement shapes reality. God is restoring the version of you that aligns with his original design. Not the broken you, not the fearful you, not the guarded you, but the you that existed in his mind before the world ever tried to shape you. And that version of you is not weak. it is not obsolete. It is not outdated. It is precisely what this next season requires. This restoration may feel tender. You may grieve the years you lived disconnected from yourself. That grief is valid, but it does not have the final word. Because even those years served a purpose. They built depth, they cultivated empathy, they sharpened discernment, and now, as identity is restored, all of that depth becomes strength instead of weight. You are not behind. You are not damaged beyond use. You are not too far removed from who you were called to be. You are right on time for identity alignment. And as this restoration settles into place, you will notice something profound. Decisions become clearer. Boundaries become healthier. Confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. You no longer need to prove who you are. You simply are. This is the second dimension of restoration, and it is reawakening the truth of who you are at your core. What time tried to bury is rising. What fear tried to silence is finding its voice again. And what life tried to redefine is being returned to its original name. As powerful and liberating as it is to see opportunities restored and identity reawakened, there is still a deeper layer to what God is doing in this season 1 that transforms restoration from personal healing into generational impact. Because God does not merely return what was taken, He redeems the process itself. He takes what the enemy meant to erase you with and turns it into the very instrument that advances your purpose. This is where restoration reaches its highest expression, the weaponization of what you once believed was wasted time. For so long, you looked at certain seasons of your life and labeled them as lost. Years that seemed unproductive. Chapters marked more by endurance than achievement. Moments you would rather not revisit because they carry memories of pain, failure, or waiting. You assumed those years were empty gaps in your story that held no real value. But heaven never saw them that way. Those years were not wasted. They were being written. Every closed door became a chapter. Every delay became a paragraph. Every betrayal became a line that would later carry authority when spoken aloud. What you survived was never meant to end with you. God was not only preserving you, He was preparing a testimony. And Scripture makes something unmistakably clear. Testimony is not merely a story, it is a weapon. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. That means victory is not only found in what Jesus did, but in what you are willing to declare about what He did in your life. Your testimony carries weight because it is proof that restoration is not theoretical, it is lived. This is why the enemy fought so hard for your silence. If he could not destroy you, he tried to bury your voice. He wanted you to believe that your story was too messy, too complicated, too embarrassing to share. He whispered that what you went through disqualified you from being used powerfully. But the truth is the opposite. What you endured did not disqualify you, it qualified you. You carry credibility that cannot be taught, authority that cannot be fabricated, compassion that cannot be faked. You cannot have a powerful testimony without a painful process. There is no way around that reality. Breakthrough requires battle, freedom requires confrontation, and transformation requires pressure. This is not punishment, it is refinement. Every person God has used mightily has walked through seasons that felt like stolen time. Joseph lost years to betrayal and imprisonment. Moses lost decades in the wilderness. David lost years running from a crown that had already been promised. Paul lost comfort, reputation, and safety. Yet none of them lost purpose. Time did not erase their calling, it sharpened it. What looked like delay was actually development. What felt like isolation was actually instruction. And what you thought was the enemy winning was God ensuring that when you finally stepped forward, you would carry substance, not just ambition. This is why your story matters. Not the polished version, not the edited highlight reel. The real one, the one that includes confusion, doubt, and survival. Because that is the version that sets other people free. God is now taking the years you were ashamed of and turning them into proof of His faithfulness. He is taking the seasons you tried to hide and making them the platform that amplifies your voice. He is taking the pain you endured and converting it into power that flows through your words, your presence, and your discernment. This is what it means for wasted time to be weaponized. The very experiences that once made you question yourself are now the experiences that allow others to trust you. But here is where courage is required. Weaponized testimony demands vulnerability. It requires you to stop hiding your scars and start showing your healing, not in a way that glorifies pain, but in a way that magnifies redemption. Your scars are not evidence of defeat, they are evidence of survival. And when spoken with humility and faith, they become keys that unlock hope in others. There are people who will hear your story and realize they are not alone. People who will see how far you've come and believe that they too can make it out of the pit they are currently in. People who are on the brink of giving up because they think too much time has passed until your testimony interrupts that lie. This is why God is restoring you fully, not just for your sake, but for theirs. Yet many people stop short at this stage because fear resurfaces. Fear of being seen. Fear of being judged. Fear of reopening old wounds. The enemy will try one last tactic here, convincing you that silence is safer than obedience. He will tell you that sharing your story will expose you, that it will invite criticism, that it will cost you comfort. And he is right about one thing: it will cost you comfort, but it will release freedom. Both for you and for those who hear it, you must understand that God never wastes pain. He redeems it. But redemption requires participation. If you keep your story locked inside, it remains dormant. When you release it, it becomes activated. Testimony gains power when it is spoken, not hidden. This does not mean oversharing or living in the past. It means speaking with purpose, discernment, and obedience. Saying what God leads you to say, when he leads you to say it in the way he leads you to say it. This is also where your perspective shifts. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin declaring, I know why this was allowed, so God could reveal himself through it. Your pain becomes purposeful. Your endurance becomes evidence. Your survival becomes a signal to others that restoration is possible. And suddenly the years you once wanted erased become the years you are grateful were redeemed. There is a spiritual authority that only comes from having walked through darkness and come out transformed. You cannot download it. You cannot imitate it. You can only earn it through experience and surrender. And that authority is now rising in you. You speak differently. You see differently. You pray differently. Because you are no longer theorizing about God's faithfulness, you are testifying to it. This is why God is asking you, now are you willing to let him use your story? Are you ready to release shame and fear and step into the authority of your testimony? Are you prepared to let what once hurt you become the very thing that heals others? This is not about performance, it is about obedience. And obedience always unlocks acceleration. Weaponized testimony does not glorify the enemy's attack, it exposes his defeat. When you declare what God has done, you remind hell that it failed. You remind heaven that you are aligned. And you remind yourself that nothing you endured was meaningless. Every tear counted. Every prayer mattered. Every day you survived when you wanted to quit was building something eternal. This dimension of restoration changes how you see your past forever. You stop wishing it away and start stewarding it. You stop being ashamed of it and start thanking God for redeeming it. You stop seeing yourself as someone who lost time and start recognizing yourself as someone who gained authority through endurance. And here is the final sobering truth: you are not restored to remain silent. Silence is not humility when God calls you to speak. Silence is fear dressed up as wisdom. And while God is patient, he is also intentional. He restores so that what he does in you can flow through you. Your life becomes a living testimony, not perfect but powerful. The years the locusts ate are not only being returned, they are being repurposed. Your delays are becoming platforms. Your losses are becoming leverage. Your survival is becoming someone else's breakthrough. This is restoration at its highest level. Not just healing what was broken, but using it to build what will outlast you. This is the third dimension, and it is already activating. What time tried to destroy is now being deployed. What you once endured in silence is now being spoken with authority. And what looked like wasted time is becoming the very weapon that advances the kingdom through your life. As all three dimensions of restoration converge, what remains is not merely inspiration, but decision. This is the moment where revelation asks for response. You can feel it now, the tension between what has been familiar and what is being activated. Part of you is ready to step forward, yet another part hesitates, stirred by old fears and conditioned resistance. That inner conflict is not failure, it is evidence that something new is breaking through. Restoration always challenges what has grown comfortable in survival mode. Understand this clearly. Resistance does not mean the word is wrong. It means the word is working. The old patterns, the old narratives, the old agreements with delay are being confronted, and they are fighting to remain. The enemy's final strategy is subtle but persistent whispering that too much time has passed, that you are too old, too behind, too marked by mistakes to fully step into what God is restoring. Yet these whispers collapse under the weight of truth. God works all things, every season, every delay, every wound for good when they are surrendered to Him. Time does not disqualify purpose, it matures it. This moment is a hinge. What you choose to believe now will determine what you experience next. Restoration does not unfold accidentally. It responds to agreement. When you say yes, heaven moves suddenly. What has been locked begins to unlock. What felt dormant begins to stir. Doors you stopped expecting begin to open, not as repeats of the past, but as upgrades prepared for who you are now. Divine acceleration follows alignment, and alignment begins when you release what is behind you. Letting go is not denial of what you endured, it is the honoring of what God is about to do. You cannot live in the graveyard of yesterday and recognize the resurrection happening today. Forward motion is required, not frantic striving, but intentional trust. Faith prepares space before fulfillment arrives. It cleans, organizes, forgives, listens, and obeys. These are not religious acts, they are relational responses to a God who restores thoroughly. As you step into this conclusion, know this: your restoration is not symbolic, it is tangible. It will show up in clarity, in courage, in renewed desire, and in doors that open at the right moment. What was stolen is being returned with increase. What was delayed is being accelerated. And what was buried is being resurrected, not to return you to who you were, but to release you into who you were always destined to become. The restoration is already in motion. Your role now is simple but sacred. Receive it, steward it, and walk forward without looking back.